Some narratives are easier to digest than others because we're used to them. Heroes are good, villains are bad, we're the hero, and that justifies any actions we take against the bad villain. But how does the villain get branded as such when they're not just cartoonishly evil in a game? Because oftentimes in reality, people of color are default marked as outsiders. They're blamed for society's ills. They're the target of sublimated fear. The more marginalized you are, across gender, sexuality, religion, the more likely you are to be that target. Sounds kind of villainous, right? Could there be a connection between marginalization, society's targeting system, and villainy? Our next speaker seems to think so. Tanya Yan is the developer behind Save the Villainess, a upcoming visual novel. She grew up as a first-generation undocumented Desi immigrant in the United States. And in Save the Villainess, you play a woman of color who's transported to a fantasy world and you don't remember how you got there. You are potentially the target of a betrayal, and there are some themes and discussions about being a marginalized woman of color in a society that's happy to sacrifice you. Here to talk about her game and these experiences, please welcome Tanya Yan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Yan from Best Laid Plans Productions, and I'm here to present my talk on Why Save the Villainess? Challenging Injustice Through Perspective. So I just want to begin by talking a little bit about who I am. So I'm a first-generation Asian American woman of color. I'm a writer, editor, and now I'm a game designer as well. I'm also neurodivergent. Although I was diagnosed later in life, I grew up knowing that I thought, I felt, and I behaved differently from the other people around me. Growing up in the 90s in the United States, it wasn't really a wonderful time to be a neurodivergent young woman. And it was especially difficult if you were growing up as a first generation immigrant in a largely non-immigrant community. So I spent years masking my neurodivergence because I wanted to try and appear normal, more like the other people around me, not the weird, spacey Asian girl who was already marked as different. However, over time, I began to embrace my identity as being different, as thinking and feeling and behaving in ways that people found unexpected and unusual. And that actually led me to becoming interested in a figure that we could call a villainess. So when you think about a villainess is a woman who's basically somehow transgressed against society. She's done something so wrong, she's become demonized by society, often as a symbol of all of its ills, or she's a scapegoat of some kind. Historical villainesses have included people like Marie Antoinette, who got her head chopped off by the French Revolution for being a symbol of the decadence of French aristocracy who would eat cake while the peasants went hungry. Or Anne Boleyn, who was Henry VIII's second wife and who essentially died supposedly for witchcraft and bewitching the king, but really because she was unable to give him a son. And villainesses also appear in fiction as a way of basically adding color and drama to the story. We have Carolyn Bingley in Pride and Prejudice, who basically is there to add more of a wrench in the plans of Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet, right? Interestingly enough, a recent popular fictional subgenre has become more and more interested in the stories of a villainess. These are called villainous isekai stories, and the main plot line to these kinds of stories is that a female character somehow becomes a villainess in a story or a game that she usually knows well. This subgenre has become incredibly popular in East Asian, Korean, Chinese, Japanese media, manhwa, manga, even TV shows and anime. And the whole idea is that if you became a villainess, if you became a hated female character for reasons beyond your control, how do you survive these circumstances? How do you basically survive a world and even a cast that hates you and wants to destroy you? How do you use your knowledge of the story to triumph over adversity? And there's a wide range of genre tones that these villainous stories can take on. For instance, this story, which is one of my favorites, Beware the Villainess, combines comedy and drama together. Other villainous isekai stories have been more on the line of tragedies, or have dipped into horror, or have been about satire, or have been about romantic comedies. There's a wide, wonderful range of villainous isekai stories. And that led, in part, to my deciding to develop Save the Villainess along with my wonderful co-developer, Emily Woodhouse. We decided to create our own villainous isekai visual novel and game, where the idea is that you get to control the villainess, this hated female character, for yourself. But we added a couple of interesting twists. For instance, our villainess is actually a neurodivergent woman of color who falls into a bad romance novel. But one twist is that she can't remember the romance novel she's lost in, so she has no idea what has happened. She has no idea who she is supposed to be or who is after her. And worst of all, she has no idea which of the other potentially romanceable characters wants to murder her. And now I would like to show you a very short clip of a flashback that Jane has about the original villainess whose body she took over, and how she was condemned during a trial and becomes a villainess, a fallen woman who is exiled from society. One of the main questions we had about the story is, who betrayed the villainess? And one of the twists I think that we introduce is that any of the game's suspects and romanceable characters could be out to destroy or save the villainess. We have, starting from the top, a crown prince, a red-headed servant, a brown-haired childhood friend, and a silver-haired Duke of the North. These are all very standard romance novel characters in a historical fantasy kingdom, and they all come across as reasonably pleasant, even on her side. But we want to ask greater questions about which of these characters could have betrayed the villainess. Which of these characters could be out to actively harm or even murder her right now? And what were their motivations? What would lead anyone to want to harm a woman and to basically mark her out as being so dramatically different that she needs to be destroyed? And ultimately, some of the central questions of Save the Villainess are, I think, questions that are very relevant to us in our everyday lives, even if we don't suddenly, find ourselves lost in a romance novel we can't remember reading. One of the central questions is, what makes a woman a villainess and an outcast in society? And this applies to both, fictional and historical societies, but also our society. Does a woman become a villainess because of what she does? Because she does something so beyond the standards of society, we have to cast her out, we have to villainize her, we have to condemn her? Is it what she desires? If she wants something that we consider consider her to not be good enough to reach, like a romantic partner or a station in life or power, does that make her a villainess? Or can a woman also become a villainess? Can a person also become a villainess or a villain or an outcast because of who they are? So Jane, we explicitly say, is a neurodiverse woman of color. It is easy to make her the other in a society, especially in a historical society that is repressive and sexist and racist and does not understand her. So ultimately, we're asking, why is it that some people are turned into scapegoats for society? Why is it that some people are harmed and society considers that harm to be perfectly fine? Society considers that harm to be something that, is allowed. That's a question we spend a lot of time probing in Save the Villainess. And that's a question that I hope connects with the questions that people and players may be grappling with in their everyday lives if they have ever been outcast, if they have ever felt like they were excluded, if they have ever felt like they were othered by people for their differences, for being different in the way they think, feel, behave, or create things in the world. And finally, in the end, I think our story is about what it means to be a villainized person and yet to find justice, to try to seek justice in a society that can easily make you into the hated other person for looking, thinking, and acting differently than other people expect. In the end, I think our story is a lot about trauma. It's a lot about abuse, but it's also a lot about enduring and even flourishing, even when you're a neurodiverse person of color who is excluded from the society that is around you. It's about it's about learning to embrace yourself. It's about learning to understand that you are a person who matters. You are a person who should not give up on yourself no matter what obstacles are in your path. And it's about basically enduring as a person of color in a world that doesn't necessarily understand you and, in fact, might even loathe you. So, thank you for viewing this talk. My name is Tanya Yan. You can always contact me at contact@bestlaidplans.net. You can find Save the Villainess on Steam. We have a free 3-hour demo for you to check out. And I just want to specially thank Game Devs of Color, my co-developer Emily Woodhouse, Saleha Chaudhary, who's our lead background and item artist, Somate Studio, who did our characters and CGIs, Sokai, who's our video editor, and Rennery, who's our graphic designer. Thank you so much for your support. And thank you again to Game Devs of Color for allowing us to give this talk and to connect with everyone else.
Tanya, thank you so much for your talk. I don't think it's surprising that we're taking a deeper look at what it means to be villainized. After all, we have more visibility into the lives of the other than ever before. I think it's a little harder for us to maintain that carte blanche excuse for war or exploitation when the other actually looks pretty human. I also think isekai is a really cool frame in which to have this discussion or exploration. We have this opportunity to use a fantasy world and a character who's conscious of those contrasts, which I think oftentimes is the experience of people of color living in societies where they have to carry a certain double consciousness. I think there's some really interesting discussion there. So thank you for sharing that preview of Save the Villainess, and thank you for sharing your experiences. Folks, if you'd like to find out more about Tanya's work, you can go to bestlaidplans.net.